sorry to Jordan, because I changed my talk at lunchtime today. I'd prepared it, obviously, but there's been this ongoing theme, obviously, about doing. But there's been a lot of inspiration today, and yesterday. And inspiration, what I'm trying to do in this last section is how we turn that inspiration to action. You know, how that becomes a catalyst to actually do. Inspiration without action leads to frustration, or talk minus action equals shit, to quote the actual equation. And so I want to get into the topic of the unexpected and the uncertain, and how we respond to uncertain and unexpected events with the kind of glamour and fabulousness as some of these people do. And to do that, I'm going to draw on some stories and some science for the next 20 minutes, and I am the least likely scientist you're ever going to meet. This is Carl Loco. Carl Loco was predicted Oxbridge grades when he was at primary school. He was gifted and talented. He grew up in Southwark to first-generation Nigerian migrants. Carl, just before his exams, saw his best friend stabbed and murdered outside his school. He died in his arms, with blood propelled from his body. Carl failed his exams directly as a result of this trauma, and he fell out of the education system and started running with the local gangs who recognized his natural aptitude and intelligence, and soon he was running the local gangs. He was heralded on the front pages of the Evening Standard as London's #1 gang leader. It took a couple of years before his natural intelligence got the better of him, and soon he started running gang programs to get other young people out of gangs. Those led into community endeavors and then social enterprise. Soon he was being picked up and lifted up by the likes of Richard Branson and Prince Harry, and he now runs a multi-million-pound incubator based in Brixton to help other young black people out of gang life. He and many other people that I've interviewed like him learned the skills of transforming uncertainty in the shadows of life. Yet they turned those techniques and tactics into the foundation for becoming leading lights in society. And I think the leaders that we have often don't have the credentials for the uncertainty that we are about to face. And yet we overlook and misunderstand people all around us who do. And that's been our endeavor. For the last 3 years, I've been working on a piece of research called the Uncertainty Experts, where I've interviewed ex-smugglers who are now trauma specialists, ex-gang leaders who are now business leaders, ex-refugees who are now CEOs, people who've been through mental health crisis or gender transition, looking for people whose lived experience of uncertainty qualifies them with the expertise that we need. And it is something that we need, because uncertainty is something that we don't like. None of us. It's come up in nearly every single talk that I've seen. That mention of it, that difficult, foggy place that heads towards us all the time, and we do our damnedest to head away from. It's something that we think about, and there's been a lot of thinking about it, but it's something that we have to understand, isn't it? It's something that we can think our way out of. It's something that we have to think and feel our way through. And this is the point I most want to land. This is something that affects us emotionally. Unless we understand that and own that, we will not be able to take the action that we want to. So, as I mentioned, this is a science-based talk, so I'd like you to join me in a scientific experiment so that we can embrace for a moment the true feeling of uncertainty, so we're not just here thinking about uncertainty. I need some volunteers. But it's been a long day, and I'm not sure that they're going to be forthcoming. So I've chosen them by placing a couple of markers under some seats for people to come and join me here on stage for some real-life uncertainty. If you'd like to look underneath your chairs now, please, ladies and gentlemen. A proper look, sir. That gentleman's not looking very vigorously. Come along now, look under that seat. It's okay. You're safe. There is no marker under any seat. It is an exercise in uncertainty. Can you just for a moment pause and feel where that was in your body? Can you feel where the uncertainty was? Was it in your chest? Were you thinking, fuck you, Sam? Was it somewhere in your stomach? Where was it? How did it translate? Because it's a feeling, and we all feel it. We feel it deeply. This is my first scientific slide, a diagram of exactly how uncertainty affects us, right? But it affects us all. There are two studies, and some of the science I'm going to repeat is real-life science, but it's the bits that really amuse me that stayed in my brain. There are two papers that demonstrate that human beings, given the choice between electric shock and uncertainty, will take the electric shock. Consistently. It translates all across society. We will do anything to avoid uncertainty. People would rather receive a negative health diagnosis than not have the diagnosis. Consistently, we prefer pain to uncertainty. We'll choose unhappiness over uncertainty. But we don't have any choice about uncertainty. So we do have a choice to make. And this is why we have to approach it with our nervous systems. Well, our entire experience of life is lived through our nervous systems. We think it's our heads because we're so smart, but the danger of smart people is they make the world more complicated. This is something we really have to feel our way into. It's a psychobiological issue. That just means we have to bring our brain and our body to the party. And there's a reason for that, right? This runs really deep, and it's just a profoundly human instinct. We take it right back to evolutionary basics, like who we are as human beings. You're all familiar with the fight, flight, freeze principle, the nervous system response, right? So on an evolutionary basis, there are 4 drivers for humanity: shelter, social groupings, sustenance, and survival. But the principle of survival is avoiding uncertainty. Out of those 4 drivers, only one of them has got harder to do. The first 3 are all much easier. You know, we've evolved that, but we've evolved to find our place in a more uncertain than ever. Here's another fun science fact. Do you know there are 7 evolutionary drivers as well as fight, flight, and freeze? Does anyone know the others? Feed makes sense. I'm in a bit of a panic. Give me a ham sandwich. Fawn, you kind of acquiesce your way out of danger. Fold, just play dead. Anyone guess the last one? Who knew? Who knew? Isn't it remarkable? But in addition to the miracle of evolution, like not only does she come up with that, but she alliterates that shit as well. Isn't that just stunning? So I'd like to try another exercise now, an experiment. This won't involve anyone coming up. But what I'd like to do is a proxy to prove to you that how important it is to bring our body to this party, because I know how smart you all are, and you're still going to think you can think your way out of uncertainty, but I'm going to prove you can't. I'd now like to give you a fright. Would that be okay? Okay. I'm going to play a small video where you're going to see a car drive through some beautiful ravines, and then something's going to jump out the side of the screen, and you're all going to be terrified. Okay? I can see all these smart faces thinking, well, I'm not going to be scared now. He's just told me exactly what's going to happen. There's no possible way I can be scared. So I'm going to prove to you that your body is in control of the situation, not your brains. You think you know exactly what's going to happen, but I'm going to prove to you how important it is that we bring our bodies, because when uncertainty strikes, it's our bodies that react. Our bodies can take control, and that then takes control and debilitates our ability to act and to do. Are you with me? Yeah. Okay, so see how hard you can try not to be scared. Chris, you with me? Thanks, mate. Isn't it a beautiful thing? The fear running down like a ripple. I could have crowd surfed my way down there. But you see, there's a... And now, see, the laughter. Laughter is directly associated with fear. Laughter is a response to let other people know that we're all right after we've been scared. But there's a really interesting thing here. In an fMRI scan, fear shows up in exactly the same way as excitement does. Exactly the same way. So there's always a choice. At that exact moment of uncertainty, there is a choice. But it's not a choice that we consciously make. Between creativity and anxiety, between action and inaction, between procrastination and doing. And we think we found the gateway to that choice. It's something called uncertainty tolerance. It is a psychological trait discovered in the 1990s by 2 Canadian psychologists who were exploring anxiety, because uncertainty is the #1 driver of anxiety, bar none. So uncertainty tolerance is something that everybody in this room has, and I'm going to hazard that this room has a high tolerance to uncertainty, which is good, because low tolerance is bad. Low tolerance to uncertainty leads to division. In numerous studies of election campaigners, people with a low tolerance to uncertainty are more likely to go for the extremist tendencies. We're more likely to fall for conspiracy theories and fake news. We're more likely to have self-doubt because uncertainty is something we feel. We're more likely to be exhausted. On the other side of the spectrum, however, high tolerance to uncertainty is pretty cool. It leads to high levels of empathy because we can spend time with people that we don't like or even disagree with. It leads to higher rates of creativity and divergent thinking. It makes us more in touch with our bodies, which means we're more able to be in touch with other people. It is a profoundly powerful skill. I'd argue it's the kind of key skill for the coming years. Trouble is, most people are on the low tendency. The research that we've done takes in nearly 20,000 people, and you can see the vast majority are in low tolerance to uncertainty. That's pretty worrying when you consider the uncertainty that's coming and how much that causes us to freeze. Like I say, I guess this room is going to be high, and I'm going to give you a chance to test your own uncertainty tolerance at the end of the talk. But this is our friends. This is our family. This is the people we work with. This is the people we're waiting on decisions for, on the stuff that's not getting done. So that's why we have to work on this. And as leaders, we have to do what we can to help others increase their tolerance to uncertainty as well. So I'm going to give you another, kind of one of my favorite science tests now, to show you where your uncertainty tolerance lives. Okay, because it's a bias. It sits deep in our subconscious, like the ancient part of the brain. So I'm going to show you where uncertainty tolerance is. Please, would you raise your pointy finger? Everyone point your finger. Take it to your forehead. Okay, and now I'm going to ask you to draw a capital letter Q. Everyone knows that. It's a circle with a tail. So please draw a capital letter Q now. Okay, very good. Thank you. Hands down. So those of you who drew the Q to your left eye, which would be this direction, please raise your hands. Quite a lot of people had to retrace it. Okay, great. Thank you very much. You drew the Q for me. Thank you. You drew the Q as if I was looking at you so that I could read the Q, which was very nice, from left to right. I appreciate that. Studies show you are better liars. I didn't say that. That's a science fact. Right, you drew the Q for me. Thank you very much. Now, who drew the Q to the right-hand side? Aha! You didn't give a shit about me. You drew the Q for yourself, goddammit. You are shown to have a better sense of self. You're also shown to have lower levels of empathy, I'm afraid. But what that shows us is where our biases sit, informing every single decision we make. And that's where your uncertainty tolerance is, informing every single decision that you make. Every single decision to take the inspiration of today and turn it into action is limited by our tolerance to step into the unknown, which is the precursor between an idea and action, the small space that we're all going to step into tomorrow on our way home, when we ask ourselves, what are we going to do as a result of this? So what do we do to push this along? Well, I can show you another example for it. Who here can see a white triangle? Except there is no white triangle, is there? There's no white triangle. There's actually no white triangle. And what happens here is your brain, your energy-saving, super efficient brain is a lazy motherfucker, and it will do all it can to find patterns. There's two really great studies where we pit human against rats to spot patterns. Do you know who wins every single time? Rats. Who wants to see patterns where there aren't patterns? Who, in times of uncertainty, will really specifically go looking for patterns that aren't there? It's why we fall for backward-looking narratives when the unknown is happening to us. It's why we fall for new normals when normal was part of the fucking problem in the first place. So there's a real need for this, right? to play in this space of our minds, because the forecast is certainly uncertain. We're not going to dwell on this point too much. It's just I really love this headline, because every time I read it, it makes me feel sick. What? The easy part? What? But to kind of get a grasp around this, because I imagine whilst uncertainty has been touched on in lots of the talks, very few of us are walking around thinking uncertainty is our problem. We're thinking the burnout that our friends face. We're thinking just the general confusion, just the fucking overwhelming meh of it all, the how hard it is to get a decision made, how hard it is to keep things moving, how hard it is to translate these brilliant ideas into action. But the point is, and it's such a point worth making, I'll even do a cliched iceberg slide to make it. Whilst our problem is the difficulty of getting stuff done, if you want to get your hands and head around the big thing that sits beneath it all, the symptoms, we can begin to try getting our hands around uncertainty. And not because it's a problem that we want to mitigate, because there's a chance really here to liberate the driver of action, the positive and generative force that uncertainty is and has always been. And we have to watch out, because there are some frameworks to address uncertainty. Most of you will be familiar with the VUCA framework. Yep, volatility, the uncertainty, complex and ambiguous world. Invented by, the kind of brains that lead to management consultants, who, once again, will not only make terrible acronyms. I mean, come on. You could have spelled something funny there if you tried. But what it misses, the point, is that uncertainty is something that we feel. And we feel it deeply. And we cannot navigate our way through it by spreadsheets alone. So we have to look beyond it, right? This is from last year. This is the Global Innovation Index. These little pink dots are 100 different global economies. This line is very clear, and it is a relationship, a causal relationship between uncertainty avoidance and innovation. Uncertainty shuts us down for the reasons that we've understood, because we're marvelous and magical human beings who have survived, as we heard earlier on, 4 times a trillion to 1. A quadrillion, I think that makes it. Because we're so good at uncertainty. But on an evolutionary basis, things have changed. We now can't avoid uncertainty. So we need to upgrade our evolutionary survival instincts. We need to draw down some aspects of this. And we need this, because at the other end of it, it's pretty problematic. In times of uncertainty, as we're in, it drives what's known as our negativity bias off the chart. Here's some fun statistics for anyone who doesn't want to try increasing their uncertainty tolerance. So, on average, we have between 40 and 60,000 thoughts a day. Why they just can't say 50,000, I don't know. 80% of those are negative. That makes sense. Most of us would agree with that. 90% of those negative thoughts are exactly the same as the ones we had the day before. You laugh because it's true. And then, out of that, only 2% of those thoughts will come true. Right? Isn't that a tiny number? But then the really important number is this. Of those 2%, 95% of the people who are in that 2% say it led to some form of growth. So that is the true outcome of the uncertainty, that we allow the worry of it to stop us from taking action. So we should hold that up against it. Now, how do we push our way through this, right? What is the principle of uncertainty experts, and what is it that we've done? So we've interviewed these remarkable stories, and then we've demonstrated, we've presented them to the world in somewhere between an online documentary, an interactive psychological intervention, and a course. I found the stories, and an incredible team of scientists helped me understand what goes on behind them so we can translate them in ways that others can turn into tactics and tools. So I've already introduced Carl. What I'd like to do now is just run you a bit of an explanation. When I asked Carl, how did he transform the fear that he faced in the streets? What is the advice he's got for overcoming fear? Because my guess is that's the one thing, in fact, I know that's the one thing that's going to stop us turning all this inspiration into action. So here is advice from one of the uncertainty experts themselves on transforming fear to action.
I had friends on the streets that was more violent than myself, had more money than me, but no one was more courageous. That was my identity. It was Lox is never scared, you know, and I was always scared. But I literally would feel it in my stomach. I could feel it. It got to a point where I could pinpoint where the fear was on my body. I'm just more afraid of regret. I'm more afraid of not leaving a legacy. I am more afraid of not contributing. I am more afraid of not moving the dial. I am more afraid of not breaking the generational curses. What if I'm 50, 60, whatever age, and looking back and like, I didn't move on that when I could have? And then this looming poison that we call regret, I almost stoke that fire. I almost enhance it. You know, I'm like, you don't want that one. That one there, that syringe is the dirty one. If that goes, that's gonna really hurt. You know, so just move.
Just move. So I would take these stories to the lab, and I worked, luckily for me, with the Decision-Making in Uncertainty Laboratory. Bit of a niche. They've been around for 10 years as part of the Brain Sciences team at University College London. They were brought into existence in 2009 after the financial collapse to work out how human beings and organizations make better decisions in times of uncertainty. Lucky find. And they would describe to me exactly what was going on in the stories that we had, and this is what's going on in Carl's story, a skill called interoception. And I give you this because it will enable you to action. Interoception is the 8th sense. We know most of the senses. They're about the external world, sight, sound, smell, and the other ones. Interoception is the internal sense. It's such a new idea in neuroscience, you still usually can't spell check it. But what it means is your ability to understand the internal signals that are going on. There's been so much of a conversation about this today, trusting our instincts. This is the science that sits behind it. Kids have bad interoception. They don't know whether they're worried or they're nervous, which is problematic on long car journeys. Most of you will know that, but in a good sense of interoception, not only can you tell your heartbeat, you know what's going on, you know what those emotional signals are telling you when they're limiting us and when they're liberating us. So I would take these and then we present them to our audience. So we show the interviews, and then we explain the science, and then a QR code pops up in the middle of the documentary and asks questions. And so it asks us, what does fear feel like in your body? And we heard Carl. He said he knew exactly where it was. And when you name it, you can tame it. So when you know when fear is striking you, when it's stopping you, you go, oh, right, that's what that is. That's what the signal is. I'm scared in this moment. And then did you hear, he asked us another thing. You know, this is the key question we ask everyone. What's a fear that holds you back? You all have one. I could make a guess as to what it is. It's probably the same as mine. But then did you see what he did? He then went into the future, and he thought about the regret that he would face if he allowed that fear, if he obeyed that fear. He then considered the regret, and he got really poetic. He put it in a needle, like a dirty syringe, and then brought that regret to himself. And then he put the regret in one hand next to the fear. And what did that enable him to do? It will never get rid of fear. Fear is a necessary protection. But it enabled him to push past it. Now, we've asked this to everybody that's come through the program, and 90% of people say the great fear they have that holds them back is a fear of failure. Probably recognizable and understandable. Interestingly, when we ask them the same question about regret, nearly the same percentage. So the regret they least want to have is missed opportunity. I'm going to imagine that chimes true of you. But let's have a look at this. What in the world is more likely to lead to missed opportunity than a fear of failure? So they're entirely symbiotic. And then the scientists gave me this. Conviction narrative theory. After 10 years at looking at uncertainty, this is the radical idea they present to the world. Conviction narrative theory is exactly what this ex-gang leader is describing. The ability to project yourself into a future uncertainty, to synthesize it so well that you have an emotional response. And then you can come back to the present and go, oh, you know what? That gut instinct that we all know and can trust, my interoceptive ability. When I really imagined what that debate was going to be like, or that scenario, or that difficult decision, it didn't feel right, it didn't feel okay. And you bring it back to the present, and our emotions, and this is the most beautiful thing, right? We've mentioned AI has got referenced almost in every talk as well. AI systems, generative AI, is based on cognitive processes. There is no technology that exists that comes anywhere near us when we're using our emotions combined with our cognitive ability. That's the one place we will outstrip everything else. So we have to bring them both to the party. It's another brilliant demonstration of an awful acronym, though. I did say to the scientist, I'm like, good job on the acronym, Dr. Bilovich. She's like, what do you mean? But there's a question that sits behind this that I'll, as it brings us to the close, because my time's out. And the question we ask is this, and I'd like to land it with you. I'm going to do a similar thing. What do you already know in your body, in your bones, in your gut, but you haven't realized it yet? You haven't admitted it, or you haven't decided it, but you're going to later this year. What is it? Sometimes it comes immediately, sometimes it takes a bit of time, but each and every one of you, there's something your whole body system already knows. And for whatever reason, we're putting it off. Is everyone there? Yeah, good. Okay, so to close. This is me 3 years ago, when my wonderful world of being an award-winning entrepreneur and best-selling author, traveling around the world, loving this new world of professional speaking, hit a pandemic. This is my webinar face. You can see how fucking much I didn't enjoy webinars, and had the hardest time in my life. I got divorced nearly 2 years before the pandemic hit. I have two amazing little kids, so I was just getting used to the duality of 50% parenting. And as we hit that part of mid-lockdown, I found myself, for the first time in my life, applying for bankruptcy, insolvency, and being diagnosed with depression. It was fucking awful. Even thinking about it, it just was grim as fuck. And these stories that I found were the leadership that I needed, that seemed to be so absent anywhere else, that anyone could talk about the uncertainty and the fragility that we were all going through with any sense of optimism or a notion that this could be the chance for the change that's required. No one could tell the truth, just say they didn't know what to do. But that together we can work it out. Because uncertainty drives isolation and separation, and it is only in the spirit of togetherness that we can and will work it out. And these stories gave me so much, and then I found the scientists. And for that, the scientist that's helped me most is in the front here. This is Catherine, who then introduced me to say hello, Catherine. Because it'd be unfair for me to take the credit for this incredible woman's work. And together, we brought this thing to the world. I literally downloaded the last of my ISA. There was no savings left whatsoever. It was fucked. And I spent 15 quid on Fiverr with a guy in Bangladesh to make me a poster that looked like it was a movie. We put this up. I did the Keyboard CEO course, and we started selling tickets, 500 tickets, to this thing. And I called it the world's first interactive documentary scientifically proven to increase your tolerance to uncertainty. It wasn't that, because it didn't exist, but it was a future truth that I was heading towards. And we sold out. And shortly after we sold out, the DMU put together a paper. And then the paper was published. Right? The results of this fucking thing works. It has more effective results than many online therapies at shifting people's psychological outlook in a time of uncertainty. I was invited to present at the Royal Society, the most venerable open organization of the sciences on earth. This is a different face altogether. This is my imposter syndrome face, remembering Dr. Phillips, my GCSE science teacher, who told me my atoms would amount to nothing. And the final point is this, because this is the thing I think that you can take away and most use. The question that we ask everybody in the show is, how does uncertainty make them feel? 89% of the responses, people say negative words, right? We're just primed that uncertainty is negative, always. And the words are anxiety, worry, panic, so we call that as fear, because all of these words could be grouped into 3 categories, and you need to know this for the people that we're working with to get them to act. The second group of words, which was similarly sized, was confusion, closed-minded, we called that fog. The third group of words, people talked about feeling stuck, purposeless, we just can't move. Okay? And 20,000 people, no one has said a word that sits outside those 3. That's the human experience. So we can talk about hybrid working and AI all we want, but the human experience underneath it, uncertainty, has a profound effect. It's fear, fog, and stasis, and that's why it's so grim. But it does make a much better acronym. And what we found is that everybody wants to be brave, and we want some clarity, and we want momentum. Well, of course we do, but that just doesn't work. If you try and push people when they're stuck, you break them. Feel the fear and do it anyway is a fast track to anxiety. What we found as a result, and this is what's published in the paper, is that fear is a driver for action, if you know how to manage it. And it's got to be managed carefully, right? Tools of emotional regulation. And that space of fog is a driver of agility, adaptiveness, and real creativity if you can stay in the doubt as a place of discovery. And the last one, the way out of stuckness, turns out, is connection. Connection to ourselves, connection to others, connection to the higher order, the reason that we're here, connection to the Do lectures. Connection moves us out of that feeling of stuckness. And then it's now working. We've got Lego and Apple and Nike have bought places on it. I'm not completely out of the shit yet, but I'm on my way. But we hear now every single day stories of people where this profound impact, because the negative aspects of uncertainty affect all aspects of our lives. And for once, I feel like one of our own audience members, because I've never done anything so life-changing. The advice of the uncertainty experts I use every day. I use it as a parent, as an entrepreneur, to face the most difficult uncertainties of my life. And so this wasn't the talk that I was going to give until lunchtime today. But I went away to draw on the things that have driven me to action, because it is the things that scare us that will stop us. And that's why we can't allow that to happen. We have to use this moment as a force to help us do more than we ever did before in a time that needs us, and you, more than ever. Thank you all very, very, very much indeed.